Look around a crowded room. Every face is different, but every single one is the same kind of thing. Human. Just human. You have never met another kind. And because of that, you carry a quiet assumption you have probably never questioned, that being human means being one thing. A single species, alone at the top, the natural and obvious result of evolution. But that assumption is a trick of the present. For almost the entire story of humanity, it was false. For most of the last 2 million years, the Earth was home to many kinds of human at once. Different species, different bodies, different minds, walking the same valleys, watching the same stars. And then, one by one, they vanished, until only you were left. So what happened to them? Where did the other humans go? And here is the question that should truly unsettle you. Why are you the one who is still here? Let us start with the scale of what has been lost. When you picture human evolution, you probably picture that famous line. A hunched ape on the left, slowly straightening up step by step into a modern man striding off the right side of the page. A neat, single-file march toward you. That image is one of the most misleading pictures in all of science. Evolution is not a ladder. It is a bush. A wild, branching, tangled bush, throwing out new shoots in every direction. And on the human branch of that bush, there was never just one twig growing at a time. There were many. Cousins and second cousins, side branches and dead ends. Many different species of human alive together, sharing the planet. How many? We are still counting. But think about the roll call. There was Homo erectus, the great survivor, who walked out of Africa and spread across the entire Old World and lasted for nearly 2 million years. There was Homo heidelbergensis, tall and heavy-browed. There was the Neanderthals in the cold of Europe and Asia. There were the Denisovans in the east. There was a tiny human on an Indonesian island, another in the Philippines, another, small-brained and strange, deep in a South African cave. At certain moments in the last 100,000 years, there were at least 4 different kinds of human on Earth at the same time, maybe more. Sit with that for a moment. If you had been born back then, you might have looked across a river and seen a different kind of human looking back at you. Not an animal, not quite you, something in between. A person, but not your person. We have never known that world, but it was the normal one. It is only the last few thousand years that are the strange exception. You are living in the weird, lonely epilogue of a much larger story. So let us meet the family you never knew you had, and let us start with the one that everyone thinks they already understand, the Neanderthals. You know the insult. Call someone a Neanderthal and you mean a brute, a knuckle-dragging, grunting, stupid caveman, too dim to survive. For over a century, that was the scientific story too. It was wrong. Completely, embarrassingly wrong. The Neanderthals were not a failed rough draft of us. They were a sophisticated human species that survived in brutal Ice Age conditions for hundreds of thousands of years, far longer so far than modern humans have managed. Their bodies were powerful and cold-adapted, thick and strong, built to hunt enormous animals up close with heavy spears. That took immense courage and skill. And their brains? Here is the part that unsettles people. The Neanderthal brain was, on average, slightly larger than yours. They controlled fire. They made complex tools. They wore clothing, treated wounds, and cared for their sick and elderly for years. We find Neanderthal skeletons that were badly injured, that survived long after those injuries, which means someone fed them, protected them, and kept them alive. That is compassion. That is culture. They buried their dead. They used pigment. In a Spanish cave, there are markings on the walls made tens of thousands of years before modern humans ever arrived in the region, which means Neanderthal hands may have made the first cave art on Earth. Does that sound like a stupid brute to you? The paleoanthropologist Chris Stringer, who has spent his life studying these ancient humans, has watched the entire picture of the Neanderthals transform, from savage failure into something far more haunting, a fully human world running in parallel to our own, a road not taken. And they are only the beginning, because the next species is even stranger. We have their DNA, but we have almost no bones. Meet the ghosts, the Denisovans. In 2010, in a cold cave in the mountains of Siberia, a tiny fragment was found, a single piece of a child's finger bone. That is almost all there was. Now, normally, a scrap like that tells you very little. But this was the dawn of a scientific revolution. A Swedish scientist named Svante Pääbo had spent decades doing something that was once thought impossible, pulling readable DNA out of ancient bones and reading the genomes of the long dead. In 2022, he would win the Nobel Prize for it. When Pääbo's team sequenced the DNA from that single finger bone, they got a shock. It was not a modern human. It was not a Neanderthal. It was a completely new kind of human, unknown to science, that no one had ever identified from its bones. An entire branch of humanity, discovered not from a skull or a skeleton, but from genetics alone. We named them the Denisovans, after the cave. And here is what is so eerie. To this day, we have only a handful of physical scraps of them, a few teeth, a finger, a piece of jaw. We barely know what they looked like, and yet we know they existed. We know they were a distinct people, and we know they ranged across a huge stretch of Asia, all of it written into the DNA they left behind, in us, because they interbred with our ancestors too. Hold that thought. We are coming back to it. Now the family gets truly wonderful, because on a remote Indonesian island called Flores, something almost unbelievable was found. A human, but a human barely more than a meter tall, Homo floresiensis. The scientists who found her could hardly believe it, and the world immediately gave her a nickname, the Hobbit. A tiny, fully grown human species with a brain about the size of a chimpanzee's, who made stone tools and hunted on their island for a very long time. They survived on their little world until perhaps 50,000 years ago, which means they were very likely still alive when modern humans were already spreading across the globe. How does a human end up that small? The likely answer is one of evolution's strangest tricks. On islands with limited food and few predators, large animals often shrink over generations. It is called island dwarfism. The same island had dwarf elephants. It seems it also shrank a kind of human. And Flores was not the only surprise. In a cave in the Philippines, another small, unknown human species was found and named Homo luzonensis. And back in South Africa, an explorer's team squeezed through a gap in a cave barely wide enough for a body, and found a chamber piled with the bones of yet another species, Homo naledi, small-brained, but with strangely modern hands and feet. And here is the mystery that still causes arguments. Those bodies may have been deliberately placed deep in the dark, on purpose. A small-brained human, possibly handling its dead with intention. The team behind that discovery, led by Lee Berger, is still fighting over what it means. Do you feel the ground shifting under you yet? This is not the tidy story you were taught. This is a planet that was, for a very long time, crowded with different kinds of people. Tall ones and tiny ones, big-brained ones and small-brained ones. On islands, in mountains, in frozen valleys. A whole extended human family. And you are the only branch that made it out. So now we arrive at the real question. If the world was so full of humans, where did they all go? And the first answer is the one that will haunt you the most. Because in a very real, physical sense, some of them never left. They are inside you. For most of the last century, scientists assumed the other human species were an evolutionary dead end. Separate branches that grew and failed and were pruned away, leaving no trace in us. Modern humans, they believed, replaced them completely. Then we learned to read the ancient DNA, and that clean story shattered. Because when Svante Pääbo's team compared the Neanderthal genome to living people, they found something extraordinary. If your ancestry lies outside of Africa, then roughly 1 to 2% of your entire genome is Neanderthal. Not a metaphor, not we are all a little bit caveman. Actual Neanderthal DNA, physically threaded through your chromosomes, in every cell of your body, right now. Your ancestors did not just meet Neanderthals, they had children with them, and those children had children in an unbroken line all the way down to you. And it was not only the Neanderthals. Some human populations, especially across Asia and the Pacific, carry Denisovan DNA as well. And this is where it becomes almost poetic. High on the Tibetan plateau, where the air is dangerously thin, people carry a special version of a gene that lets them thrive at altitude, where others would sicken. When the geneticist Rasmus Nielsen and his colleagues traced that gene, they found it did not come from us. It was a gift, handed down from the Denisovans tens of thousands of years ago. A vanished species still helping living people breathe on the roof of the world. Think about what this means. The other humans did not simply die out and disappear. They merged. Their blood, their genes, their adaptations folded into ours and carried forward. When you ask where the other humans went, part of the honest answer is nowhere. You are partly made of them. But that cannot be the whole story, because the Neanderthals, as a distinct people, are gone. The Denisovans are gone. The Hobbits are gone. The interbreeding was real, but it was a trickle, not a merger of equals. So something still caused these ancient, capable, successful humans to vanish as their own kind. What was it? This is one of the greatest mysteries in all of science, and the honest truth is, we do not fully know. But we have suspects. The first suspect is climate. The last ice age was a violent, unstable time, with the world lurching between deep cold and sudden thaw. The Neanderthals were superbly adapted to a particular kind of icy Europe, but when the climate convulsed again and again, their small, scattered populations may have been pushed to the very edge, and a species living on the edge does not need much of a final push. Which brings the second suspect. Us. Around the time the Neanderthals faded, modern humans were pouring into their lands, and we may simply have been better at the one thing that matters most: numbers. We seem to have lived in larger, more connected groups. We traded objects across enormous distances, which means we had wide social networks, webs of alliance and exchange stretching over the horizon. We had projectile weapons, spears and darts we could throw, letting us kill from a safe distance, while the Neanderthals closed in for the dangerous, up-close kill. We did not necessarily outthink them. The evidence for that is thin. But we may have out-networked them, outnumbered them, out-connected them. In a hard world, a bigger, better-linked population can absorb losses that a small, isolated one cannot.
And then there is the quietest suspect of all. Not war, not slaughter, just time and mathematics. The Neanderthals were never many. Their genes show low diversity, small bands spread thin across a huge, hostile continent. When a new, growing population moved in alongside them, competing for the same animals, the same valleys, the same shelter, the Neanderthals did not need to be massacred. They just needed to have slightly fewer children, slightly more often, for long enough. Slowly outbred, slowly absorbed. Slowly edged out of existence, generation by generation, until the last small groups flickered and were gone, somewhere around 40,000 years ago. Somewhere, at some point, there was a last Neanderthal, the final member of a people who had endured for hundreds of thousands of years. We do not know if they died alone or among family, or whether they even understood that they were the end of something vast. But it happened. A whole way of being human simply stopped. And the same silence fell, one by one, on all the others. The last Denisovan, the last Hobbit on Flores, the last of the small-brained people in the South African dark. One by one, the lights of the human family went out, until only a single branch was left burning. Yours. So let us return, finally, to the question that started all of this. Why you? Why is it your kind, out of all of them, that inherited the whole planet? And the most honest, most humbling answer science can give is this. It may not be because you were the best. We would love the story to be flattering. That we won because we were smarter, kinder, more advanced, the destined masters of the earth. But the Neanderthals had bigger brains. The Denisovans conquered altitudes we could not. Homo erectus survived for nearly 2 million years, far longer than our own species has yet managed. These were not failures. They were triumphs in their own right that simply ran out of time. Perhaps you are here because your ancestors were slightly more connected. Perhaps because they got lucky with the weather. Perhaps because they were more numerous at exactly the wrong moment for everyone else. Perhaps because, instead of only replacing the others, they also loved some of them and carried a piece of them forward. Most likely, it was all of these things, tangled together, with a great deal of chance thrown on top. You are not the peak of evolution. You are the sole survivor of it. And that is a very different and far stranger thing to be. So look around that crowded room again. Every face, human. Just human. It feels so complete, so obvious, so alone at the top. But now you know the truth. That loneliness is new. For 2 million years, you had cousins, other minds, other kinds sharing the world. You are not the natural end of the story. You are the last one standing at the end of a long, quiet funeral for an entire family of humans. A family that lives on, faintly, in the DNA behind your eyes. You were never just human. You are everything that is left of them.